Okay, we are now being live streamed. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our City Association board meeting for September. Everyone had a good day and fall is upon us. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7:14 p.m. And we get a roll call, please. Ann Bybee, present. Hung Wei. Sheila Mohan.
Here.
Sally Meadows. Here. Stanley Mock.
I'm here for him. Linda Swan.
Rob Rennie.
Here.
Carmen Montano. Here. David Elahi.
Present.
Mark Turner. Marilyn Lieber. Margaret Abekoga. Here. Lydia Ku. Here. Sergio Jimenez. Kathy Watanabe.
Here.
Tina Walia.
Here.
Larry Klein. Alyssa Cisneros. Perfect. Great, thank you. I actually took this out of order, so we'll go back to public comment on non-agendized items. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on a non-agendized item, either in person or online? Let me see. We have folks online, but no one has raised their hand for public comment. Great. We will close that item and go to the consent agenda. Are there any members wishing to pull or speak on any items on our consent agenda? And if not, entertain a motion and a second.
So moved.
Motion by Sheila Montano, second by Member Ku. Any members of the public wishing to speak on consent? Anyone online? No one's raised their hand. Okay. We will close public comment, and I guess we need to do a roll call vote for this. Yes. Motion to approve the consent agenda was made by Director Montano, seconded by Director Ku. I will call you out by city. Campbell. Aye. Cupertino.
Hi.
Los Altos. Aye. Los Gatos.
Aye.
Milpitas.
Hi.
Montes Sereno.
Aye.
Mountain View. Aye. Palo Alto.
Yes.
Santa Clara.
Yes.
Saratoga.
Aye.
Sunnyvale. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Great, thank you. We're going on to item 2, update from me. As thank you to those who attended. Sorry, I back these glasses. In August, we had the housing symposium in lieu of our meeting. As many of you were there, I hope you found it informative. I would just report that I serve on the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority that is looking at this regional housing bond measure, and we will be making some decisions in the next couple of months on in terms of the allocation of how much funding will go to different programs and so forth. So please, if you have any questions, please reach out to me, or if you have any comments, or I'm happy to take input. So I would appreciate your input if you have any thoughts on this bond measure potential possibility. Yes.
I just wanted to say, when you said we would be making some decisions soon, we is this body, which body?
I'm sorry, we, the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority. So it's a committee, and then they make recommendations to both the ABAG board and the MTC board. Ultimately, it's actually the MTC commission that will make the final decision on these. Thank you. And then just looking ahead, we have this month and then a couple more meetings, and then December is our holiday party. So we've had a little planning meeting to get ready for that. So we hope to have some details soon and hope you'll join us. The dates all moved around over the years, but we're going to stick to the second Thursday of the month in December. So please mark your calendars for that. And that's it. Any questions, comments, and members of the public? No one online has their hand up. Great, we'll move on then to item 3. We have a couple of guest speakers today. The first one is from the county. We have Sarah Duffy, who is the Chief Children's Officer for Santa Clara County Office of Children and Families Policy. And the short bio on Sarah. Sarah has over a decade of experience leading initiatives to support children and families across the Bay Area, promoting evidence-based policies and programs that increase opportunities and advance equity. And then with her, accompanying her is Paul Murphy, and he's no quantity. He's been with the county for a very long time, working on public policy for over 20 years, including budget and policy positions for county supervisors Joe Simidian, Liz This, and most recently Cindy Chavez. He has retired and now has joined the Valley Health Foundation since his retirement from the county to continue to contribute to our community. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
We're all set to go.
Should we get started?
Please let me know when to advance the slide.
Okay, you can advance. Thank you. So I'm Sarah Duffy with the Office of Children and Families Policy in Santa Clara County. Paul, do you want to?
Oh, sure. Paul Murphy, Program Officer with Valley Health Foundation. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so yes, thank you very much for having us. We'll try to be brief. I know you have a lot on your agenda tonight, but we really wanted to, the main purpose of our presentation is to share with you a really great opportunity for small businesses throughout the county to apply for childcare grants. So we're going to talk about that today. On the agenda, we've done our intro. I'll give a quick overview of the Office of Children and Families Policy so you all know what our office does, and then you know who I am, and so that we can connect in the future on various projects and issues that are important to you all around kids and families. So quick overview of our office, then I'll turn it over to Paul and he'll go over the new grant program. We'll talk about that and hopefully ways that we can collaborate with cities, and then we'll do a QA at the end. Thank you. So the Office of Children and Families Policy is a relatively new office in the county. It was created by the Board of Supervisors with support from the county administration, really to understand what are the most critical needs facing children and families and communities across the county, and then how the county is working together to create the best supports possible to ensure the well-being of kids and families. So it's located in the county executive's office. It's a pretty small office. It's myself and about 7 other employees. And we kind of broke down our work and our work plan for the year into these 3 buckets. So these are the areas where we spend most of our time. We do a lot of policy analysis. So this involves looking at state and federal legislation, identifying policies that the county could really benefit from, as well as working on creating new policies that support kids and families on key issues that emerge. We have a lot of work that we do around collaboration. So we work with city partners, we work with school districts, partners like the County Office of Education, First Five, and CBOs, to identify what we are all doing in service of kids and families and make sure that we're recognizing opportunities to align and we're not kind of working in silos, but that we're really connecting, because we know that really kids and families don't experience like one agency or one program at a time. They experience services a lot more holistically. So we want to make sure that those of us that are working with kids and families can identify services quickly and easily. And then the last area is strategic issues and initiatives. So when there are really critical issues that come up we will do research on those and sometimes we'll do pilot programs. And so that's actually what we're here today to talk about is a pilot program related to addressing the real need for more childcare in the county, really with a focus on our youngest kids. So we know that's a big issue. COVID has made it a lot worse. And so our office is holding a pilot program in that area. Next slide. And I'll just really introduce this very quickly, then I'll turn it over to Paul. In February, the Board of Supervisors approved a really significant investment of $20 million to expand quality childcare slots, as well as to continue to expand some existing and also relatively new childcare workforce investments. So, so there's a few different workforce development investments in partnership with our local child development programs at community colleges to build up the childcare workforce. That's about $5 million of funding went to that. And then $15 million is going towards a grants program that will make funding available for local licensed family and center-based childcare. And that is kicking off right now. And so that's why we're here, because we want to give you all the information that we have so that you can get the word out and encourage providers in your communities to apply.
Great. Maybe go to the next slide, please. I just want to tell you that Valley Health Foundation was previously called Valley Medical Center Foundation, and the change in name was to denote that the county now owns and operates 3 hospitals, Valley Medical Center, St. Louis and O'Connor Hospital, and the 15 clinics. And I'm a program officer there. And just really briefly, in thinking about coming to your group, first, thank you for giving us the time, but also I had the opportunity, I'd say the honor, to work for Supervisor Chavez during COVID. So I was able to see what the cities in our county and what your organization, the role that you played in helping the community face COVID, address COVID, and really save lives. And it was amazing to me, the collaboration and the way that everyone worked together. And I know that the association was a big part of that. So thank you very much. The $15 million, the pre-eligibility forms became live Monday. I don't know if the camera can see this, but there's flyers over here. And it has a QR code. They're in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. We've offered them in soft copy. I brought a bunch of copies and I'll get them back from Charlie and Steve if they're not all taken. They won't go to waste, I promise. We'll get them out to people. There are 2 types of providers, a family provider or a center provider. The grants are available to both groups. And the eligible, as a slide tells you, the eligible use of grant funds include major construction and renovations to make a center licensable or increase or recover lost capacity. So it's really focused, it's ARPA money on the qualified census tracts that were most severely impacted by COVID and to increase capacity. So I might go from a small family home to a big family home. I might be a center that can build a new building or finish building a new building. So there's also minor construction, renovations, repair, and modernization to increase or recover lost capacity. It has some examples there. And then operating costs for centers and families to do things like give more training to increase the quality, to even have a little reserve built up, to pay staff more, to hire additional staff, to improve the developmental nature of the equipment that's available at the center, those types of things. So we're in the process of receiving pre-eligibility forms from centers and providers, at which point we'll assess them for their eligibility and then send them the longer forms of the applications. Next slide. We put this slide in here. This is a really interesting document. It's the Early Learning Needs Assessment from the Office of Education that was just recently released. And this is a slide that stratifies some data by city. And I know that's really helpful to you and your work and your governance and your jurisdictions. There's a lot of numbers here and it's in your packet, but generally it just denotes the significant need and the unmet need across the county in each city for infant and toddler slots. And there's multiple reasons for that. One, the implementations of transitional kindergarten, and also until recently, the infant rates from the state were pretty low. So to make a business work serving infants and toddlers was difficult. So we're really interested in supporting providers as they transition what might be a preschool program to an infant and toddler program. But I'd encourage you to take a look at this slide and that document as a whole. Next slide. Collaborating with cities. So they are ARPA funds, so they must be expended and projects must be completed by December 31st, 2026. So that's why the county is helping Valley Health Foundation work quickly to get this grant application out into the world. And we have engaged a construction consultant that will be developing a guidebook in 3 languages for providers to how to navigate that construction process because it's so difficult. And local jurisdictions can support the grant program by ensuring childcare providers are able to successfully complete the construction and city permits requirements, timelines, and hearings if applicable. The county executive's office did a survey before we joined the project, and we tried to finish it, and we had great responses from each of your jurisdictions and city managers. Thank you, to gather the contacts in building and planning and the other areas so that we can help the grantees who are seeking to start and finish these construction projects be successful. So thank you for that. And I should just also add that with Shali's help, we've done a very broad outreach program to every licensed provider, but also to every jurisdiction, multiple people within your jurisdiction. I think just yesterday I did a more targeted one to parks and libraries to say, here's the flyer. And if you want us to print flyers and bring them to you to distribute, we're open to do that. So we are seeking to make the information known countywide. And then grantees will also be supported by navigators as they complete their applications. This is really, if you remember I call it a strange acronym, CHEBET, Community Health Business Engagement Teams. Those are the people that were going door to door during COVID on the county's behalf to schedule appointments to help with testing, housing, food. And the county has really continued that initiative with promotores, guerreras, and navigators. So if I'm a family provider, and this is a very big application, it seems to me, it's challenging for me to do it. I speak Spanish or Vietnamese. The county executive office has assigned staff to help me do that. Come to where I am and meet with me to do that. It's really a credit to the county executive's office. Next slide. Here's the timeline. We are holding in-person presentations in San Jose on September 23rd and in the Gilroy Library on September 30th. Our intent is to provide the information in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. We're also going to host webinars. So one for the family providers and one for the centers. And the recordings of those webinars, we intend to put them up on our website. So they'll be available countywide to people at any time that's convenient for them to view them. And then the end of November will be the deadline to apply for the first round of funding. And we say first round, I suspect we'll get many more requests as we have received so many already this week than there are funds. But as Sarah mentioned, it's a pilot program. And I think that it'll be very effective in demonstrating and quantifying the unmet need in this policy area. Next slide, please. And that's it. Thank you. We really wanted to be respectful of your agenda and get through things quickly. I have offered my business card on the table as well. And you're welcome to contact me by phone or email, and I'm available to answer any questions for you or your colleagues.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Can you go to that paragraph? That paragraph.
I'll pull it up.
So confused, is the red the unmet need or is the blue the unmet need?
The
blue is the number of children in working families, and the red is the number of childcare slots. So the graph generally depicts that the number of slots are woefully inadequate for infant and toddlers across the county and the jurisdictions. It's that top right graph.
in the right and the left is the preschool, and the big increase in preschool is because of transitional kindergarten being required for all 4-year-olds. This is a really great document, and the County Office of Ed just released it earlier this month, and it has a lot of city-specific information and just general information on kind of the current state of childcare needs and supply. I think we have a link there, but we can definitely send it out. I'd highly recommend it so you can kind of get a really current.
So let me get this straight. So this pilot program is to help because during COVID, a lot of childcare centers, family daycare centers closed down.
That's right.
So this is to help lead the pool of childcare providers.
Yes.
And so you're giving assistance to help them set up their business, small business.
And expand.
Yeah, that's pretty good, yeah. So just to let you know, so we were the first and probably the only city to give some of our ARPA funds for childcare. And I probably know that already.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yes.
not many cities yet, but it's really important. Very
It's
important.
really important and we've met with your city manager and also the school district. But there's some really great opportunities.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
It's good. Glad you're doing that.
Director Watanabe?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I wanted to ask, do you have a website that you could just call out real quickly? Because I'm not there and I'd love to have some more information.
Sure. You can either Google Valley Health Foundation and childcare, or I can do the long version, www.valleyhealthfoundation.org / I think childcare.
Oh, I have the,
Okay,
I
Oh,
got it.
yeah. And then Shali has the link that will be shared with you as well. Thank you for that
Great.
question. If you're interested in our website.
thank you.
I have a question on this chart. So if I'm reading this correctly, we have, because of TK, a lot of preschool slots more than need, but we're missing infants. So is this funding, is it trying to transition some of those?
It can be,
Preschool.
yeah, it's really opening new slots. So if that means that a center would like to use the funds to change slots and open additional infant and toddler, that's a great use of it. There'll be criteria, and one of the priorities is infant slots, toddler slots, and slots for children with special needs. And that can be any age. That can be infant, toddler, preschool, after school. We know there's a really high need for programs that specialize in working with children with special needs. We're also hearing anecdotally that as a result of COVID, particularly in the young elementary school grades, kids are coming in at higher rates of having some social emotional challenges and qualifying as special needs. So we want to, and we know from principals and administrators and teachers that like that aftercare area is a real gap in working with kids with special needs. So we're really, the funding is limited, and the county would love to see the programs that are really doing innovative work, that are really addressing some of the highest needs in the county, apply for funding so that we can kind of lift that up and highlight it. And as Paul mentioned, kind of identify these as models for further funding and policy.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. And this is a really exciting program. I think we should all be excited about it. These are all things that directly affect our residents' lives in maybe the most fundamental ways. It's their kids, and daycare is extremely, extremely expensive. Parents spend an inordinate amount of their
Yes.
take-home income on this. So the more available, the cheaper it can be, the more accessible it is. And it's terrible if you're working and you have to drive half an hour out of your way just to get your kid childcare. So all of this is just directly related to our residents' lives, and I appreciate it. What does the enrollment look like right now for the childcare workforce programs? Is there low enrollment, high enrollment, and there's not enough enough programming to put out the number of qualified professionals we need? Or what does that look like?
But for the 5 million, it's actually a
Or
total
like,
of
I'm
10.
thinking, so are there a lot of people wanting to become childcare providers now, and we're gonna be helping by?
That's a tricky question. That's a real challenge, is building up the childcare workforce in this area, because oftentimes it's like a lower paying field. So, and during COVID, what we saw, and this is nationally and certainly really elevated in California and in this region, Santa Clara County, where there's a high cost of living. We saw a lot of childcare providers exit the field because, for two reasons, like they were concerned about their health, or they had to care for, family members, or they just didn't have the enrollment because families were pulling their kids out of childcare, and then they left and then returned into the workforce. A lot of them got jobs that may have been higher paying, and so it's hard to bring them back into the field. So one of the areas that our office is working on, in collaboration with a lot of other organizations and advocates that are really interested in building the workforce up, is advocating for policies at the state level that will help bring about increased wages. And it gets complicated because it has to do with subsidies to childcare providers, but really mechanisms to increase wages, so that, and also to highlight through like professional development and workforce paths, what are some of the real, what are some of the most kind of positive and great things about being a childcare provider and highlighting those as early as middle and high school to try to get young people engaged and interested in the field. So we're trying to kind of work multiple angles to build up the workforce with partners at universities. First Five is a huge partner in the Fort County Office of Ed, different organizations, just to really try to build it up and address the wage issue too. But that said, we do have these apprenticeship programs and they're fully enrolled with interest beyond what the programs can build. So there is a lot of interest. We just have to keep it going, keep the momentum going.
That's great to hear. So when I think about that kind of investment, it's like, where are we in terms of actually having a program that's needed to cover this? And then as far as I want to talk about the applicants and the pool of money a little bit. There are two, what I heard was there are two things. There are daycare centers, which you think is like more of a brick and mortar. If nobody lives there, you open it through certain hours each day. And then there's the in-home daycare. Is there a ratio you're aiming for in terms of grant distribution? Is it 40% in-home, 60% childcare centers? No specific ratio, or because you have a capacity issue and also funding. So I'm curious to hear about what your goals are in terms of how to distribute that funding among the two different options.
Sure. I mean, I can say the market, there's about 2/3 of the licensed facilities are family facilities, and the pre-qualification requests we've received have been proportional, but the amount of money that a center needs to do something is much greater than a family. We haven't specifically designated the amounts because it's a pilot program and we want to look at the need. We really need to assess what's most transformational to the system. But I can say that we have money set aside also for the family providers who are new providers. So if I've been around for less, and I always use myself rather than speak in the third person, but if I'm a provider and I've been licensed for less than 2 years, or I have a pending license, so I expect to get my license by May of 2024, or to the point that was raised, I have an inactive license. So I had a license, went inactive in COVID, then we're offering $50,000 kind of startup grants to those individuals who qualify just to help them. And to your first question, I think exactly what Sarah said. First Five is a significant partner in the county in that work. And I know they're finishing their strategic plan, which is a big undertaking for them. That document will be out soon. And I've witnessed in the east side of San Jose, the CC Puede Collective bring together a group of women and moms who want to become licensed and help them walk through that process the whole way with classes and kind of orienting them to the license. So I think we're seeing really great movements afoot to increase the workforce and the number of licensed facilities.
And if I heard you correctly, you're going to get more applications and you have money for it in the pilot program?
It's hard to say,
Oh, okay,
probably.
no.
Based on the pre-app, based on the interest through the pre-eligibility form, Paul, I'd say it's quite possible.
And so how would you evaluate those applications to see who is there? Is there a system to where you have the most need? We can point to that data there and say, there's a lot of need in this city or this area. Would you then give higher weight to those participating there? Or is there any way, I'm just curious on that.
So one, there's equity criteria that have been provided by the county for Valley Health Foundation to use. And we are funding on a rolling basis because of the need for expediency to get the funds out. So we're looking at eligibility for specific things like, are you in a qualified census tract? And are you increasing your slots? And are you increasing the infant toddler slots? So we'll be building a rubric to evaluate each of the applications to determine and then get the money out there for it to be used in the way it was intended.
And that'll all be outlined in the NOFA. So the NOFA, when it's released, will identify the criteria used to evaluate and score. So it'll be very transparent and it should make it really clear what applicants need to put into their proposal in order to get the maximum number of points.
Great, awesome, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I'll take the last two questions.
I just have one more last.
I'm sorry, can I have David go first?
Sorry. I mean, it's wonderful what you guys are doing, but there's real need. I'm just curious, how does this, is there any subsidy for the people who need the daycare? Because it's very expensive.
So that's a great question.
You know, it's good that they'll be able to at least have daycare, but is there any provisions for helping those people out?
So the state runs the childcare subsidy program right now. At a point in time, there are around 1,500 subsidy holders in the county that don't have, can't find spaces. So the state provides the subsidies. The state's going through a process right now of reforming the amount of subsidies to actually increase them, which is great. But we need more spots for the families that are convenient to where they are looking for childcare. So what this program will do is create the spots, and we will be, one of the criteria that one of the equity criteria is those providers that do accept the subsidies will get extra points, and they will be higher, kind of rated a bit higher than those that don't accept childcare subsidies. So that's how we're approaching that.
And does the program continue? I mean, it helps initially, but after 2 or 3 years, if the need is still there.
We're hoping that once they reopen, they use these funds for the construction to reopen, that they then, they've added a classroom, for example, and that classroom continues to operate based on the fees and subsidies that the provider collects once it's open.
It's a 2-year program, and we are going to work with the providers in terms of sustainability, but that's the amount of money that was allocated. And again, ARPA sunsets December 2026, so we can't speak to policy decisions that may be made by the state, federal government, or the county in terms of after the 2 years.
Just a quick question. So can cities apply for these grants? Because our city had it's still there, a child development center, but it's dormant, can't be used. So I was wondering if.
Yes, I think priority will be given to full day slots. So in a lot of cases, right, a city may offer, may not be licensed and it will offer only a part day, but if a city wanted to, for example, contract with a third party to come in and offer full day care, yes, they could apply for funds. Paul, that's correct, right?
These questions are helpful because we're writing our FAQs, so thank you.
This is one of the first things our office thought about. So I hope I'm not misspeaking, but yeah, I think they can do that. And we'll definitely have that in the NOFA will address that question.
I will open us up to the public. Speak online. Nope, no one has their hand raised. Thank you so much. And the materials are here if anyone would like to back with you.
Yes.
Now we have a second set of speakers today. Dave Driscoll, who is the principal, and Samantha Dolgoff, project manager for our community planning collaborative. And that they're here to give us an update. So I'm gonna forego the bios, they're quite long. So in the interest of time, but and Dave is online, is that right? Yes.
Yeah.
So Dave's gonna kick us off. Okay, welcome.
Thanks, Charlie. I'm going to do a quick kickoff and then hand it over to Sam. Just quickly, just a reminder, so Santa Clara County Planning Collaborative is a forum that brings together the planning and housing staff from across all your jurisdictions, 16 jurisdictions across the county. We meet once a month. In fact, we had our monthly meeting earlier today and covered a bunch of topics. It's a place for shared learning. It's a place for collaboration. We're going to share with you some products that were created through this collaborative effort. We have an RFP going out later this month for 7 of the jurisdictions that are doing feasibility studies and nexus studies are required for updating your inclusionary or establishing inclusionary or linkage fee requirements in your jurisdictions. So it's an opportunity to share resources and save money. And then also we've been doing a lot of delivering technical assistance to support everyone in what has been, I know, a very challenging housing element process. For the collaborative has been going for a little over 2 years. Actually was started by your jurisdiction staff. There were contributions from each of the jurisdictions to help fund it and make it start up. And then we were super fortunate that the Regional Early Action Planning, or REAP, grants from the state that went to ABAG were then distributed. Some of the money went directly to your jurisdictions to support the planning and needs you need for the housing element. And then some of it went to these collaboratives which are set up around the Bay Area. And we were happy to already have something in place and be able to receive those funds and use those to drive a lot of the work that we're going to share a little bit tonight. And we're actually going to come back in October and talk more in depth about the full range of initiatives, things that are going on, and a look ahead to 2024 and some of the things that are being identified for us to collaborate on next year. Sam, the other thing I wanted to point out, so we're going to be back in October, and also we're going to invite you to an in-person meeting we're planning in November, probably November 9th. We're nailing down the details, and once we know that, we'll let you know, an opportunity to get together, talk about shared housing challenges, learn a bit about things that are going on across your jurisdictions, and do some networking focused on housing. Sam's going to share with you tonight some resources we're really excited about. We wanted to come tonight because they are live and they're up on the web, and we want to make sure everyone's aware of them. These are resources to help folks build ADUs across your various jurisdictions. And Sam, I'm going to hand it over to you to share in person. And Sam's been the person who's led this work, so she knows it in depth. And again, we're excited to share it with you and hope you'll help us get the word out about these. Sam.
Great, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me, everyone. I'm Samantha Dolga. I'm the project manager, both for the collaborative and for this ADU work that we were doing. So I'm going to just share my screen here. Start the slideshow. Sorry, hold on a second. All right, so I'm here to share what we're calling Santa Clara County ADU. It is okay. Oh, sorry, it's a little slow. So what it is it's a joint initiative of all of your staff who work together to actually create ADU resources for your community members. So generally, we just always want to put forward what the community benefits of ADUs are for your jurisdictions, for the people that live in your jurisdictions. They're really, really important as housing for young families. They're important for places as where you could age in place or where your family can live with you. They're really important as housing for local workers. And they can also act as wealth building and extra income for homeowners. And they can also result in increased property values. And finally, there's also really great environmental benefits for kind of, lightly densifying our neighborhoods, bringing people closer to community resources and to where they work. So in order to support all of those things, we developed a bunch of ADU resources for homeowners who are interested in building ADUs. We wanted there to be some really nice, consistent regional information for your community members who are interested in this. The resources were developed really in order to try to save people time and money, and also save your staff time and resources. The benefits for residents really are that people are happier when they understand the rules in the process and they can get through it more quickly and more easily. For staff, it's really important that they also are familiar with their own process and they're all kind of speaking the same language. They're aligned in the planning department and at the counter for building permits. There's less staff time answering the same questions that homeowners have. And then hopefully they get more complete applications, which take less time to process. And then finally, we want to make sure that more ADUs are built. We want there to be more housing options for residents. And when there's more housing options, especially ADUs, you're getting more RENIC credit. So it means your next housing element will hopefully be a little bit easier, and you'll be meeting your housing element goals, which many of your staff have said that ADU programs are going to be a very important part for how they're going to be actually meeting their RENA numbers. So the resources that we developed, we did a lot of work with your staff. We had an advisory committee that was very well attended by your planning staff. We did a whole discovery process with them. We had them fill out surveys so that we could find out what their process was, who was building ADUs, who we should really be kind of thinking about when we were developing these resources. And then as we developed these tools and resources, we made sure to get staff input and have them review them at every step of the way. So where we are now is we have launched the website and a guidebook for homeowners. So the website is just this right here. It's live right now. And it takes people through the entire process of building an ADU. It also has a guidebook associated with it, which is a more in-depth overview of the process. So people can actually print this out and start looking through each step. So we kind of break it down as 6 different steps to walk through the ADU process. First is getting started, like thinking about it, getting inspiration, learning the rules, learning your city's rules and process, figuring out your budget, designing, permitting, and then building and renting it or moving it. So we'd love if you wanted to go and check this out. We did send out a launch email to your staff. We're happy to share that with you as well so that you can send it out in your newsletters. But within the website, there's actually even additional tools for homeowners to use. So most of your jurisdictions now have these local rules sheets, which actually talks about what is in the ADU ordinance, because ADU ordinances are very difficult to read. And so what these do is they distill what is allowed. So how many ADUs you can build, where they can be built, what type they can be, what the setbacks have to be, parking requirements. So basically everything that they would need to know in order to design their ADU and plan out what it's going to be. There's also a cost calculator. It estimates costs based on the type of construction, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, and you can look based on where you live. It also calculates fees, which each of your jurisdiction staff went through and actually like put into the back end of the calculator so people can get a really good idea of what the potential fees will be, since that is one of the bigger barriers to people being able to afford EDU construction. And then there's an ADU glossary, which is very important because there's a lot of terms that are used that people are not familiar with. So if anyone is not sure about the ADU terms, even here in this room, which I wasn't before starting ADU work, this could be a really great primer for people as well. There's also a process handout, which is a very high level overview of what steps you need to take in order to build an ADU. And then within the guidebook, there are homeowner exercises to help people figure out what they're supposed to do at each step of the process. There are also inspirational stories from a couple of places in Santa Clara. We talked to some people about what their experience was building an ADU, living in an ADU, and what the cost and experience was like to build. And there's also a floor plans gallery where people can look at actually example floor plans to try and figure out what would work best for what their goals are for the ADU. And then finally, coming soon, we're developing an ADU plans gallery, which is a searchable database of ADU plans meant for homeowners. These are mostly pre-reviewed and publicly developed plan sets that homeowners can use. When we say pre-reviewed, we mean a lot of these were developed by other jurisdictions with public grant funding. They're engineered plan sets that have already been reviewed by the building department of that jurisdiction that created the plans. So they should all meet California Building Code. And then there's a bunch of other options that are the prefab options that are certified by HCD. So there's a lot of options here for people to use that should align with the building code already. So people are hopefully coming with plans that will be easier for your building officials to review. So this will help homeowners, first of all, save money on design costs, and also it'll save your staff review time, hopefully. And once this is launched, we will be onboarding your building officials to potentially pre-review some of these plans for your own jurisdiction. And then those plans can be marked for homeowners that, say they live in Cupertino, they decide they want to have use the plan that's been pre-reviewed by the Cupertino Building Department. They give it to the Cupertino Building Department, and the Cupertino Building Department says, okay, we're just going to look at this and then the site, and then basically it's approved. So we will be onboarding your staff on that in the coming months as well. And so just as a reminder, this this work was made possible by the Planning Collaborative, which we've been helping manage. Your staff is all amazing. They're very engaged, and they've given us really great feedback on developing these tools. And we're excited to continue our work with you through the next grant cycle. So if there is any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm thrilled beyond. I did check the rules for Saratoga. I was skimming because a lot of that, I spent 10 years on the planning commission. So I vaguely recall quite a bit of the changes that were happening with setbacks and all of that. It's really good because residents want to do this and they get lost in the information. So my first glance, very happy. Thank you.
Yes, Director Rennie.
I would appreciate like a section that talked about being a good neighbor when you're building your ADU. And, you know, in Los Gatos, we've had a lot of ADUs built and I'm getting a lot of blowback because we don't get to review them and say, oh, you should change this. It's basically, you know, yep, you checked all the boxes, and people then build on the fence line with windows overlooking somebody's yard. That's the number one thing people hate, is all of a sudden there's a 2-story building at their fence with a window looking into their pool. And we can't do anything about it. We don't get to review it. So if you're encouraging people to ADUs, it would be nice to have a section. Also think about being a good neighbor when designing your ADU or how you're orienting it. You could put suggestion, well, if you want a window, put it higher up so you can't as easily look into the neighbor's yard and they won't be as upset. And so a section like that to help reduce the blowback, because as we get these, there's going to be enough blowback that maybe something's going to come and somebody's going to eventually make a law to end the benefit of ADUs. I'm always it's good, but let's try to make sure it doesn't become so bad that it eventually gets stopped. So just a thought.
So, so this looks great. And so if we point people this direction and then they go into each of our individual cities like Los Altos, will they say, oh yeah, that's what the county says, but you know, we do this. So how representative is this? Has each jurisdiction bought into it? And is there a little legend that might say not applicable in Los Altos or you know, so in other words, the public looks at this, it's great. They run in and say, here's what this told me. And then we tell them, well, yes, but.
So all of the sheets were developed by your own staff. So whatever is in that sheet was what was given to us by your staff. So it should align with whatever is in your ordinance.
The city specific.
Yes, city.
But the overall information
Oh,
on the
so
website.
we make it general enough that we own, the information is aligned with the state law, basically.
Okay.
So as long as your cities are aligned with state law, which from what I saw, everyone is, there shouldn't be any information that is incorrect in the more general part of the information.
So Sally, thanks for jogging my memory. My one thought was earlier, how are you going to keep this updated? I was thinking of the fees, but Sally brought up the point that in the state, I've gone through this situation way too many times. It'll happen again in 6 months. And every city will be on a different timeline. So how are we going to make sure that each city, once they have updated, it's creating more work for the planners essentially to send you the information. So both fees and updates about the setbacks and all of that.
So the forms are actually Google Forms, and your staff have access to the back end, so they can update it at any time that they would like to. They can also send us the updates and we can add them in. Since we're managing the collaborative, this is a little bit different than some of our other projects. We can make sure to help facilitate that.
So to back up, you're managing the collaborative. Are the cities signed into the collaborative? Is there a contract? Is there an end date to that?
So what David was saying is that we, for the last 2 years, have been managing the collaborative through funding from the REAP grant, which is given out by ABAG. That will continue for the next 2 years, so 2024 and 2025. So we will continue to be managing the collaborative, and we have active participants from basically every jurisdiction that come to our monthly meetings and reach out for technical assistance on one-off occasions as well.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, this is really great. So just to toot our city's horn. So we use some of our ARPA funds to waive the fees for ADUs. I think we're the only city.
That is a best practice
Yeah.
for sure.
And so I'm sure that our city is working closely with you, so. Just to toot home.
That's great.
About how much is the REAP fund, the REAP grant?
So the last 2-year grant was a little over $600,000, and I think the upcoming one is going to be slightly less than that. And I think there is going to be, I think that ABAG may be asking for a match from jurisdictions. But once we have more information about that, we'll be sure to share that with you all.
It's a 2.0, REAP 2.0 process.
That's right, yeah. That will start at the beginning of 2024.
Thank you.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
I think Sam and David are amazing and wonderful, but they're extremely humble. And I think Sam has not said how much help that they have given to all of our city staffs. I sit in on some of those meetings and I eavesdrop to see like, what our consultants are doing. And it's really, really amazing the amount of work that it's, I think you kind of gloss over your involvement a little bit, but I don't think that our cities would be where they are without Sam and David and the planning collaborative.
And just to have it all compiled into one is really very helpful. So I was just gonna ask, the links to the site, will they be on our Cities Association website and each city?
Yes, so I think we already added it to the Cities Association website. And we're happy, we also sent out to your staff like language that they can add to their to the ADU pages on your website as well, and then link people to the website through that way as well.
I think what would be good is if we could do like a press release.
That would be wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, and actually we did talk about that with staff today. And so we are going to be preparing a press release, our press release language that we can share out with everyone to get the word out.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ned Thomas has a.
Thank you. If I might just make a few comments. So I currently serve, Ned Thomas, I currently serve as the acting city manager for the city of Milpitas, but in my previous role as a planning director, just to give some input from staff perspective, I was there from the beginning of the collaborative as they came in to work on this project and other projects. And it's a wonderful example of collaboration. All of the cities are doing something related to ADUs, and a lot of it is governed now, of course, by state law. So most of us are doing the same thing. So it was really good for us to get together. And I'll just say that the business community or the builders love this because we're individual cities, but they're working in all of our cities. So to the extent on a project like this, that we can come together and streamline by having standardized approach is the best thing we can possibly do. So I think we're all have our eye on our arena numbers, and the ADUs will help us with that. So this is really a very good example of the type of collaboration that we have on things where we have mutual interests.
Thank you for that. Anyone online?
No one online has their hand up.
Any other members of the public wish to speak? Thank you.
Oh, can I say a few words about the Nexus study?
Oh, yes, please.
The City Association will hold a contract for that.
Yeah.
And can you say a few words? Is it too early to say a few words? I don't know.
I haven't personally been working on it. Maybe David remembers more about what exactly is happening with that one.
Yeah, I know. So there's 7 jurisdictions that are involved. The idea of this is we're putting out a joint RFP under the sponsorship of the Cities Association, which is super helpful because all the jurisdictions are part of it, but someone has to hold the master contract. So we'll be actually hoping to put out the RFP later this month. I'm happy to talk more in depth about that when we come in October. But the idea is we'll be hiring one consultant or a team of consultants to do the work across 7 jurisdictions. So there'll be some cost savings because a lot of the data they'll pull together will be common across the jurisdictions and some will be very tailored. But this is some of the analysis that are required to either update or put in place inclusionary zoning or a linkage fee program where you're charging on a per square foot basis for residential or commercial development to help fund your affordable housing initiatives. So there's 7 jurisdictions that have been working together to put that together. And we're hoping to finalize that RFP and get it on the street and be in a hiring process probably late October, early November.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sam came all the way down from San Francisco.
Oh, really?
Lafayette.
Farther. No. Well, thank you for being here in person. It's really nice to have you.
Yeah.
We will now move on to item 4, which is our joint powers agreement update and discussion, hopefully action this evening. So many of you know, I think some of you may be new to this conversation. So we have an outline of how we wanted to proceed tonight. I was going to share some historical background on how we got to this point. Jenny Quinn is our legal counsel, and she will be sharing the legal process and steps moving forward. And then my vice president, Misa Sprager, will talk about the process going forward and what the next steps are. And then hopefully the hope is that we can get this done by the end of this year. And the reason why is that we've actually been talking about this, and Jenny I just looked it up, since 2017. So the Cities Association has run as a non-formal unincorporated association, yes, for many years. And this association has been around since the 1990s, I believe. And over the years, and just personally, I have been on the Cities Association for probably about 10 years myself. And so over the course of even my time, we've had incidents where we've had some challenges, things as small as Brown Act violation questions. And we didn't have a legal counsel, frankly, until the last 2 years or so. To bigger issues, and some of you were around in the last 2-3 years when we had some challenge with our former executive director, liability issues. So we felt that it was important for us to become a incorporated organization of some form. And over the years, we have researched what type of organization we should or could be. We looked at whether we could be a 501c3, but because a large part of our mission is advocacy, we don't qualify for that. We looked at 501c4, and that is a possibility, but the challenge there is, and I've been actually working on incorporating some nonprofits, it takes a really long time to do that. And then I'll just go back and say, we actually at one point, this was earlier in my tour, we thought we had applied and we were accepted as a 501c3. I believe it was C3. And then we had a legal accountant tell us that we were actually not, that was not legitimate. So that's why we had to restart the process in 2017. So we landed on the Joint Powers Authority model because it seems to fit our mission and our organization best. And we also have examples of other successful JPAs, such as Silicon Valley Clean Energy, which actually came out of this organization. And Janie was actually the legal counsel who led the effort to form that JPA. So that is how we've come to this point. We were able to draft this document, I want to say last year, it was like last year.
I'm the third general counsel that's looking at this document for this organization.
So, and so we ran it through all of your city attorneys and compiled all of the comments and tried to put them all into this document. We then ran it through all of your city managers. We've met with them at least 2 times now, got their input and comments, made those revisions. And so we are here this evening with all of those edits and hoping to get all of your comments and if possible, try to adopt this evening. And the reason being this time issue. One of the challenges with our organization is that every year our membership changes based on who's mayor and whatnot. And so I've been at this for a couple of years now, and it feels like when we start the new year, we have to start over to some extent because we have new members joining the board. So the hope is that we could potentially complete this by the end of this year, so we don't need to do that and go into year 7. So I'm gonna leave it, I guess, hand it over to Janie, if you could talk about the legal process moving
Yes.
forward.
And I think just to add a little bit more context to what Margaret was saying is one of the concerns when this incident happened with the executive director, the city attorneys became very familiar with the cities association and with all the legal issues. And what came to light is that as an unincorporated association, there's always going to be a question about whether liability would go to the individual cities. And that's one of the reasons that I think that a joint powers authority was selected. And just to, a joint powers authority is formed under California law, and it's under the joint, I think is what it's, the Joint Exercise of Powers Act. And it governs everything from how you can form one to what authority you can have, how you're restricted, how you do business. You have to register with the state. So that should provide some bit of assurance for the cities and in particular the city attorneys. So in drafting this, my predecessors actually did go out and meet with the city attorneys and did provide them with the draft and did have a number of discussions. So when it came back to the board, I think that was almost a year ago, the 72 changes were made to this document. So we really tried to listen to the city attorneys and take them, to address their issues. The other 2 pieces are really about liability, because if this state law allows is for us to create a separate entity for your common interests and to have liability rest with that entity. What was also an interesting, I think, side effect of this incident that occurred with the prior executive director is that we did have insurance, and that insurance was canceled because of the incident. So as a public entity, because the JPA is a public entity, we'd have access to risk pools. So there's kind of the 3 issues for us. It's having this kind of known organizational structure. It's having the ability to have liability rest very clearly with this organization instead of a concern that it might go out to the individual members, and the ability to obtain insurance. And also there's a question about the ability, what is revenue and whether or not this organization can have revenue and are the dues revenue. So it would also address that issue. So there are a number of legal reasons why I think this structure was recommended and continues to be recommended. I wanted to point out that what the state law says is you can do all of these things. Here's all the things a JPA can do. And what the attorneys have done is they've looked at and they said, okay, this is what we're comfortable with the cities association being able to do. And this is what we have concerns. Why would the cities association need to be able to levy taxes? good point. Okay, we took that out. Why should the cities association be able to have real property? Yeah, another good point. So not only have we removed those provisions from the agreement, but we've actually inserted a prohibition that we can't do that. And in terms of the process, in order for this agreement to come to fruition, it's one thing for the board tonight would approve it, say, okay, yes, I want you to take this out to the individual cities and I want you to ask them to authorize the person with signature authority to sign it. But if we ever want to change that document, we have to go back to each of those entities. So we're very thoughtful about what goes in this master document. The cities association already has a set of bylaws. And so the other document we would need is a set of bylaws, there was a question that had to do about members on the executive committee and whether or not we should put, in particular, there's a provision in the JPA that talks about what happens if an immediate past president is no longer an elected individual. What are we going to do? And so they would serve on the executive committee once there were at least 11 of the cities joined the JPA. We would have a process to allow a member of large to be selected and take that person's place to serve in the immediate past president's place for the remainder of the year. And that's a provision I think that would go into the bylaws. So your work's not going to be done. If this all goes well, I think what we do is we use the existing bylaws as a starting point and we have a meeting to talk about if there are any things that people would like to change or see additions. And so that would be the other big piece of work. But in terms of transitioning from the unincorporated association to the JPA or an unincorporated association to a 501c4, that it's a much shorter, which also means less general counsel and less executive director time to get to that point. What else? There was one other thing about that I wanted to point out. We also are going to need to dissolve the unincorporated association. And it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. We need to see how far down the road that we're going to get with the cities and getting our JPA on their agendas and making sure that we have enough votes to become a JPA, but we would come back with a resolution and ask this board to approve the dissolution of that unincorporated association and transfer everything to the JPA. There was one other question that I wanted to point out too, because you might think it's unusual that there's a reference to Los Gatos, and that was your question as well. And what that comes straight out of the state law that requires, there's a specific provision that says that we as a JPA would have to designate one member entity to go by their rules. And so, for example, in the Silicon Valley Regional Interoperability Authority, they follow Cupertino. So it means if we don't have something that's clear in here, or we have a dispute, or we need to look to somebody, we're going to look to Los Gatos. And that was a choice that was actually, I think, agreed upon by the various city attorneys and the prior general counsel. They picked Los Gatos. And I think too, there was another question from San Jose, and I think maybe Lisa might be better to speak about that one, about each city's individual process. And I can chime in if you would like me to do that at all. But what is San Jose supposed to do once they get if the board were to approve the JPA and it's transmitted to the individual city, what happens next?
Happy to take that, Jani. So we've heard the background, how we got here, and Jani has laid out the benefits to our cities to transition to a JPA. So my role is basically to explain next steps and how we actually get to adoption of the JPA. And so just to clarify, what we're doing tonight is reviewing the JPA with the board members, seeing if you have any additional edits or comments, because we've heard from your city attorneys, we've heard from your city managers, and then incorporate whatever comments and edits that we hear from you that majority or more agree with, and then take a motion to direct all of us, the board members, representatives, to take it back to your individual city council members to approve it. So this is the first step of a 3-step process. The direction tonight would be for you to take it to your city councils for approval. And as you know, for the city councils, it is majority. So you would need majority or more of your councils to approve the JPA, and you have seen a draft of the document.
When we met with the city managers group, it was a very robust discussion. We got a lot of comments and feedback. I think they had submitted many questions a couple months ago. But there were some cities, well, city managers who believe that their councils may need to do a study session prior to bringing it to their councils. I will say majority of the city managers there felt like they could actually just bring it to their council, put it on the agenda. Matter of fact, I think Mountain View city manager said she thought she could just put it on consent, because our city managers, as you know, have a sense of their council members where they would be on this type of item. And so we're leaving it up to each city to determine if they do a study session prior to bringing it to their council, or if they bring it straight to their councils. But again, a study session is not required. I've talked to my city manager, Mayor Meadows, and he also plans, I don't think he'll put it on consent, but I think he's going to bring it forward, because one advantage of bringing it directly to your councils is you'll see whether or not a study session is requested. You can always put it on your agenda, and if majority or more of your council members say, wait a minute, we would like more time to discuss that, then you would have an opportunity to do the study session. But again, we're leaving it up to each city to determine how they want to take it from tonight. Margaret, or President, is working with Shali, our executive director, to divvy up the executive board members and assign them to different cities. So there are 5 executive board members, and then former President Chappie Jones has also volunteered to help if we need him. But the idea is, if your city believes they would like someone there to answer questions, explain the process, explain the legal benefits, why we need to do this as an organization, let us know. And then Margaret and Shali will assign one of the executive board members to attend the study session or the council meeting. From a timeline perspective, we're hoping that you will take this back to your councils and your city managers and have it heard at your next council meetings. I know we have noticing requirements that comply with all the Brown Act requirements, but as soon as possible, because the ultimate goal is to have adoption of our JPA by our November meeting. And so we do have a buffer Cities Association meeting in October, just in case we need to regroup. It would be great if we get all the approvals and we can adopt it in October, but we recognize everybody has a different timeline, the processes may be different. And so looking at adoption in November, we're hoping that you'll work with your city managers, city attorneys, and come up with a timeline that we can adopt it by November. To Janice's point about the bylaws, because I know that was one of the questions raised, first, we need to create an organization. We've heard the concerns related to our existing structure. We first need to have an organization before we look at, okay, what should be the bylaws for this organization? And that's another reason why we really need to create the JPA before we move to the next step of creating bylaws that will help govern our organization. So that's the timeline. That's what we're hoping for. And we're very excited about the draft. I think we've come a long way. And to Margaret's point, we really need to get it. I actually don't think it's a want, Margaret. We need to get it done, because you and I have been around for a couple of years now, where we start over in January, we have new council members, and we appreciate the questions, but it also means we're starting over. And so we really need this team to work with us. We're working with the city managers, the city attorneys to get this done. And December is our party. And so that's why it's something to celebrate. But that's another reason why it's November, in case someone is thinking, why November, not December? We don't have a meeting in December. And so really need your help, and any suggestions you have in order to get us to that finish line by November, we would really appreciate hearing. So thank you.
Can I add one thing? Maybe a couple that we're in contact with the city manager, so we will also send it to the city managers. But also that we are going to do a staff report, so that you would have a template staff report that you can just adjust to whatever your particular city requirements are, and at least the basics would be in there to make it easier for you.
And that was requested by the city manager group. They thought it would be helpful to have the staff report, so we said yes.
And then we have heard from 2 cities that we know that there will be study sessions. So we've heard from Santa Clara and Palo Alto that is not, that's their desire. We're just trying to schedule them.
So why was the staff report not provided for this group here?
So tonight, we wanted to run this by all of you to get any final comments or potential edits. and then we would go from there. So we weren't ready to do the staff
I
report.
see, and the thing is, with regards to transparency, I would think that we would want to sunshine this to our council to get their feedback, through a study session. That's what we're proposing to do. And from what I'm hearing tonight is the action is to get our feedback and then incorporate all of it in, then go back for approval. So it seems like if we're going to be doing that, then it's going to actually be taking longer. It should be, I think the action should be having us go take it back for a study session so that we can get feedback from the public as well as from our council.
And Mayor
And
Coop,
I understand that you said some cities are just ready to jump in and do this. I appreciate that.
and Mayor Coop, if I could just clarify 2 points. One, even bringing it to a council meeting, as you know, you can still get input from council members and make suggested edits. The plan in the timeline would be for the board representatives to take it back to their cities, have a study session and or council meeting. Whatever input, edits, comments that you receive from your colleagues and other council members, you would bring that back to us in October. So we do want feedback and input from other councils in the event that they have them. So that's why we have that buffer October meeting. In the event that you're hearing from your council members that a majority or more that they would like to see a certain change, we would bring it back for discussion. So there is that buffer meeting that allows for additional input. If Palo Alto, for example, doesn't have majority or more approving it, but they have questions.
Well, and I just would add to it, it's kind of it's a call, and I think that's the board's call too, but it's a call about the amount of time that the general counsel spent previously with the city attorneys for all the member agencies, and there were multiple opportunities over several months for them to provide input on behalf of each of the cities that they represented. So, and then there have been opportunities for the city managers. And so I think it's a question of figuring out what is the right amount of outreach, and so the proposal is where we are
Right, because
tonight.
at this point, what I'm hearing is that it has gone through to the city managers as well as the city attorneys, but we have no report on what was discussed within the city managers and the city attorneys. I certainly know what my city is saying, but I'd like to hear what all the other cities are saying too, through their city manager and attorneys. What is consensus, or what is the areas of
So this
disagreement?
document is the consensus.
There's a lot of things that's not in here that was suggested by some of the city attorneys.
There were, my understanding, there were maybe a few, but it was less than a handful of the 72 changes that were made. So we tried to satisfy as many of it as they could. There were a few that weren't, but the city attorneys had a second look at it and they're fine with it. So we have run it by them at least twice, city managers twice, and this is what we've come up with as consensus.
And I did include the city manager's questions and our responses to those questions.
So, Chair, I'm a little bit confused because we haven't even voted if we want a JPA. We discussed it about the potential of it. This association staff was going to do research, but it hasn't come back to the board for us to vote if we even want it. So there's this false assumption that we already approved it, but now we're going to be going over the details of what's going to go in the bylaws. And from my understanding, I agree with Mayor Lydia. I agree with you because we haven't even taken it to our city council to even look at it. And then most importantly, our city managers. I haven't heard from our city managers. I mean, what did the city managers group, how many are for it? How many are against it? Because I really trust our city managers because they know what they're doing. They've been in this business for a very long time. And
attorney.
I'm not just going to jump and decide that I'm going to approve this without feedback from the city managers and our city council.
And we did ask.
I haven't seen all the details.
We did. So your city manager was at the city manager's meetings.
And which one?
Was
that the Steve McCarris?
McCarris was there
He's no longer there with
originally.
us.
I thought the second.
Yeah, the interim.
Okay, yeah. So I know, but But I want to know what all the city meant. What was the consensus? Do they agree with the JPA or do?
Yes, so that's what this document is after going through all of your city attorneys at least twice and your city managers, answering all of the questions that they had, incorporating all of their changes or as much as we could into the document. There was conflict with some cities' attorneys, frankly, so we had to just pick, right? So this is the compilation of all of that over the last year and a half. And last year around this time, this board, I don't remember if you were there, but this board voted unanimously to
In
move
2020,
forward.
in
Was it
2020.
2020? So maybe you weren't there at that time, but the board did vote to move forward with
So
forming a
I think that was,
JPA.
I think I was there, and from my understanding, it was to do to decide whether to do research to, but we were still gonna vote on it, whether to adopt it or not.
Oh, so that's this
And,
document that we're now actually to adopt this evening. So we voted that night, we voted to move forward with the formation of a JPA. We did all of the research, drafted this document, and we are bringing it forward this evening to ask for your adoption of the final document that would form the JPA.
I think it highlights, I think the length of time kind of highlights
That's
one
the
of the
challenge.
problems. So
Yeah.
there was an agenda item for this body, October 13th of 2022, and we could send it out, where it was to review and recommend that you comment upon, but take no formal action on this draft agreement. And so that was suspended. That's before my time. So that was suspended. But according to that staff report in August of 2020, the board of directors unanimously agreed to take, they chose a joint powers authority over the 501c4. And so I think with my firm coming on board and Gary leaving and all of that, we find ourselves here almost a year later. And I think it just highlights one of the issues with the passage of time. But that might be helpful to, because it does, it's a staff report for this body that points out a number of the issues.
Well, I don't think that we were giving all the details. For example, if our fees are raised, they've already been, I had concern about our fees being raised. If they're raised, can we, do we have a say-so? We don't have a say-so whether they're raised or not. Also, if, well, a couple of other questions that I had, can't remember right now, but it just seems that once you become a JPA, we're gonna have our local, the JPA will become its own entity, and we won't have any local control or local say in, is that the case?
No,
So these are questions that I don't know, and I need to know, because if, you know, I'm not going to vote for something that I'm not clear on.
so we do vote on the fees every year. We did that, I think it was a month or two ago. So we present you the budget, and with that comes the fees. So you do have a say in that. In terms of,
And the other one is the, you know, the flight path. We're not part of that, but if we become part of the JPA, are we obligated to be on that?
Is at the airport.
Yeah.
Noise.
Yeah.
So,
So that's another issue.
and some have asked if we could reform that organization, or I don't know what committee.
Roundtable.
Roundtable.
Yeah.
That's certainly an option. We just need to, you know, having gone through all of this, I just really believe we need to be some kind of formal legal entity that will protect us from any kind of, you know, challenges like the ones we had. So this is really the opportunity for us to start that if there's enough interest. You know, we have the REAP money that came in, the planning collaborative. We would not be able to get that. I don't think a city in itself can get those grant funds. So we were able to do that as a cities association. So the hope is that you and your colleagues see the benefit of the cities association. And I'll say that it has evolved over time. When I first started, there was a point where we actually thought about disbanding because we didn't have anything to do. And then things changed and, you know, we were able to get the clean energy going from here. And then the planning, we're growing. We're growing as an organization. We are growing, I would say, in our identity as legislators look to the cities association now more than before for input. And so I think as we grow, it's just becoming more and more important for us to have the, you know, our liability and have the legal status so that we protect ourselves from any kind of challenges like we had before. So that's really what we're trying to do here, protect all of our cities from.
I get it. That when that lawsuit came up in the beginning, I was for the JPA, but now I'm, you know, I have my questions on it, but we'll see.
Yes.
So I wonder if some of this is around the word adopt, because really the next step is to take this to our councils. And of course, our city attorneys and city managers will be there and have the discussion and get input. So we individually, I feel, the question is, do you have the comfort level to take this and have the discussion, which is exactly the questions you're asking. You can have that discussion with your peer group. And then we come back and, you know, maybe Los Gatos doesn't have a question. It was on consent, it's done. And, you know, Los Altos has 3 and Milpitas has 25. But, you know, really what we're deciding tonight is can we take this to our councils? And are there changes, tweaks that we want tonight? I'm not seeing this as adoption. I'm seeing this as I'm willing to present this to my legislative body to consider.
It doesn't exist, right? So there's not, I mean, I think that's a fair way to frame it, is to approve transmitting it to the respective agencies to prepare for this board to decide whether or not each entity has to decide if they want to be a part of the JPA. And it's structured so that there have to be a minimum of 8 members. The hope is that it would be all 15 of the cities, right?
Yes.
So I submitted some questions and they haven't all been answered, but one is about the liability. I still don't really understand the difference between the association and a JPA and the liability. If we're a JPA and there was a claim that was filed or there was an issue that arose, who pays for the legal fees for that?
So the difference between the unincorporated association and one of the bones of contention, and because the matter was resolved, it was never completely determined. But as this unincorporated association, if there is a claim, it's not clear that the unincorporated association would be the liable entity, that it could go back to the individual members. With a JPA, it's a separate legal entity, so the liability rests with that entity. And as a joint powers authority, there is the opportunity to go and join a risk pool. So not only can you say that the entity and not the individual members are liable, you also have the opportunity to obtain insurance if something were to occur. And the JPA is drafted that to the extent permitted by law, that the JPA will be the liable entity and will defend and indemnify the members if there is a legal issue that arises.
But the JPA is all the cities, so the money is still going to come from the cities like it did for the association when we had the suit, the claim. I mean, we had insurance and the insurance didn't pay all of it.
That's true.
So
that's true.
So where
the difference would have been that if it had proceeded to a lawsuit, it would have been the association would have been a defendant and every city would have been a defendant. And that is the difference. If it is a JPA, the JPA is the defendant. If the JPA goes bankrupt and there's a plaintiff that wants a judgment against that entity, then they're not going to be able to get that, right? But it's having this separate legal entity that would bear the responsibility.
And as far as the dues structure, you mentioned that we approve the dues through our budget, but if we're creating a new association and we don't have, and let's say not all the cities join, the dues, the cost is going to be more. It's going to be higher than what we're paying now if not all the cities join into the JPA. And so to me, the dues should be part of this discussion.
I agree.
That's just my 2 cents on it. And then the last thing, I think it's important, in my view, that we not only look to create the JPA agreement, but we should be looking at the bylaws as well, because there are sections in the JPA that really involve a process, and the process should be identified with the JPA. And the one section that I referred to is what you spoke to earlier about the executive, the immediate past president, and if that person is no longer an elected official, there will be a mechanism for a successor, but it doesn't talk about the process and how is that going to be handled. And I think that's an important component.
And there are existing bylaws, and that would be the jumping off spot from my perspective. There are existing bylaws for how this organization works, and we would look at those and say, do those work from your perspective? And they do have some provisions in the existing bylaws about how the selection is done and when the
But
selection
it
is
seems
done.
like it should be done concurrently instead of,
And that's,
that's just my opinion.
and that could very well be I think one of the concerns is about the amount of resources in my legal bills. I mean, to be honest, I'm happy. I find it really interesting. I would spend hours on it, but the thought was, is it the right idea for me to develop bylaws and spend the time on that if it doesn't have legs, if a majority of the members are not willing to be in a JPA? So it's that chicken egg.
I think some of the bylaws will depend on the number or which cities end up joining. Yes, Mayor.
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment since we spoke about the budget? Having developed the budget in this last cycle, I would not develop a budget that was beyond our means. And so if there's 8 cities joining, I'm not going to develop a budget that would require the money of 15 cities. If that makes sense. What that means is that then this board would have to make decisions about what projects they choose to pursue and which ones they don't. So the governance really lies with this board. So I just want to reassure you that, of the 8 cities that join, they're not going to have to pay the dues equivalent of 15 cities.
That's what I was gonna say too, is that we'll just have to adjust the budget according to the number of cities we have.
But the costs right now are pretty fixed as far as staff and projects and overhead. And I mean, we're barely making it now with this 15 cities and the dues that we're paying. So if you have only 8 cities, obviously your dues are going to increase. I mean, I just do the math. I don't understand that.
I think we just have to pare down and do that.
We can look at hours. There are different things we can do and consider.
And to be honest, Frank, right now, a lot of our time hours have been spent on the JPA. And so I don't want to, but I think, our legal costs will come down once we're done with this. So you'll see some fluctuation in the dues. I believe. Yes.
Couple questions. Article 10 officers. You don't have the LAC chair listed as officers. Have we done away with LAC chair or?
So go ahead, Margaret.
So we made the LAC chair the second vice president. Second vice president.
Okay.
Is the LAC chair.
So it's a dual role. And normally you I don't know if it's official or unofficial, you have a progression where you go through the officers, right? Where'd you start? Was it treasurer and then you went to LAC, or maybe LAC, treasurer, second, first, president, whatever it is? Is that an official progression? Because it's not listed in here either. It's just sort of a gentleman's agreement kind of thing.
And those are more in the bylaws. But yes, and that's that issue, I've heard from many of you, and I agree. maybe we change that up so more people have opportunity to be on the executive board and we don't have to have a 5-year progression. So those are the things that I would hope that our next conversation on the bylaws would include. So we need to get through this, I believe, before we can have those in-depth conversations. But
Well, and so I realize, so reading on to Article 11, it talks about the executive committee and it says it's the president, first vice president, and the secretary treasurer, but I thought that, again, the progression, if we're keeping the progression, was LAC, secretary, treasurer / treasurer, second, first president. This is sort of strange because now if you keep that, the secretary treasurer is on the executive committee, they move up to second vice president, they're no longer on the executive committee, then they move to first vice president, and they're back on the executive committee. So it looks kind of funny to me.
so in this document, the point of that was to to decide like how many executive board members there would be if there were 8 cities. And then I think when we get to 11, we get to the full 5. So that was the point of that being in here.
Okay.
In terms of how that succession happens would be included in the bylaws. So we're missing, it goes from 3 to 5, basically.
But this says solely 3. How are you going to change it to 5?
Because it says, at such time as there are 11 members, the board shall establish and elect an executive committee.
Oh, okay, you're right.
5.
I read past that.
And I don't have the background, not having been here, but there was that's if there's a scenario where 8 or 9 of the cities are interested in being a part of the JPA, but the other cities don't want to make sure that you don't have a Brown Act issue. But you have some leadership.
That's all my questions for now. Thank you.
I still have some questions. So, what I'm hearing is the forming of the JPA is to limit liability or to eliminate liability. And I hear that you had explored the 501c3, 4, and so forth. So are there other ways to avoid liability that has been explored? I mean, that's the main thing that we're doing this JPA for.
I don't know if there are any other, do you know any other types of association?
So that was just a question, the other thing is, having this JPA, it really gives this body a broad amount of power. And one of the things that I've always objected to is that some of our representatives that are appointed to certain regional committees like BOSQA and like to ABAG and all that, they're not even told how to vote. So they're not taking our votes to go and vote at these regional bodies. They're voting whichever way they want. I don't even know if they're representing their cities at that point. So I have a huge concern when they're going out and representing the Cities Association of Santa Clara County, which means my city, and voting the way that they want to, when it's not from the body. The other part of it is, each city is unique in its own way. So if we're going to say this body is going to vote on a number of things and it involves my city, and if my city is highly objected, does not agree with it, then on your letterhead, it also states Palo Alto as part of it. I haven't seen a letter that has gone through and said which party said no, which city said no. Lastly,
there's a couple of issues there, and I think Nisa can talk about the LAC fees. And then this is a very interesting organization from one perspective, that the state requires every county, and I think if you haven't had the chance to look at the city manager questions, there might be some helpful information in there, but every county has to have a city selection committee to appoint people to these bodies, and they're not appointed by the cities association. The cities association actually administers that. And in this county, that's the way that it's done. And even if the members don't join the JPA, there still has to be a city selection committee. And if there is a JPA of 8 members, and the JPA is responsible for administering the city selection committee, even those cities that aren't a part of the JPA are required to be able to participate in that. But I don't know if there's some, I think the other issue that you raise is one that Nisa can address about the lack.
And Mayor Ku, that's a great suggestion. I will tell you that the executive committee has incorporated suggestions from Javed and others over the last couple of years when they've wanted to see us insert certain things in our letter. And so to your point, going forward, I think that's definitely something we can discuss as a board. If when we send letters to Sacramento, if there are cities that opposed or took a different position, do we want to include those cities and say they didn't take a position or they opposed it? That is definitely something I think as a group we should discuss. Because I remember with Javed, I'm going to put you on the spot, Javed, one of the things he wanted to highlight in our letters were positions taken by smaller cities or how a potential bill could impact smaller cities versus San Jose. And so we were very intentional in making sure in these letters that our representatives read that they saw that and they caught that. I remember last year, State Senator Becker, when I talked to them about some of the bills, those are the things they noticed, like, you know, how did the Hills feel about this, like different things. But that's a great suggestion. It wouldn't go in the JPA, but I think this is good feedback because what we're hearing from folks, I think too, it's just things that have concerned them over the years about Cities Association as an entity, regardless if we're a 501c3 or 4 or a JPA.
As an entity, I would have to say there has been great concerns in the past experience on the actions of the executive board as well as the as well as LAC, as well as, the board itself, not with the members here, because every year there are changes. I would have to say that, in the past with what had happened with the petition claim by our former executive director, there are council members out there whose reputations are marred because of that. And this body has not stepped up in order to clear their reputations or to clear their name. So I feel that, this is something that was really wrong that we didn't do this as a cities association. And I just don't feel that, I think that provisions needs to be written into this in order to ensure that this doesn't happen again. As a confidential matter, but then also their names were not cleared. Then there's another part is, I don't think it's reflected in this JPA that is executive director and general counsel's position employees?
Contractors.
Independent.
So is it included in this document that clearly stated that they're independent contractors? Because I didn't see
That was
that.
something that also came out of the city managers
Yes.
meeting to make that explicit.
Yeah, city managers wanted that.
They do have the power to hire employees, but we are independent contractors.
They have, so this body has the ability to hire employees.
The board,
The
not
board.
the board, but we have identified our executive director and legal counsel as independent contractors.
And what makes us know how to do human resources?
So one of the, Jani, do you want to talk about the grievance process and what was raised at the city managers meeting?
Yes, that was a concern of expressed by the city managers, that we have some sort of policy or grievance process. It was particularly focused at having a grievance process should an issue arise.
So are we ready to handle pensions and CalPERS and all that as well?
We're contractors.
No, you are. But the employee that.
When Auden worked for us, was she an employee or a contractor?
Auden was an employee and she is the last employee that we had, because when I was hired, I'm a contractor. So I pay my own taxes on it. And since Auden is no longer with us, I'll just say, whoever we hire, should we decide to hire someone to fill that position, he or she will, or they will also be a contractor.
And can I,
that way.
and can I just add, just going back to what Janice said about the process to make any changes to a JPA? If we were to make any changes to the JPA, it would have to go back to all cities to review and approve those amendments. And so the document you're seeing before you may have some provisions that sitting here today, we wouldn't exercise, right? But we want to make sure that if 5 years down the road, we want the ability to do that, it's there. Bear in mind, as a board, we all would have to approve it. It's not something that's made by the executive committee. So as a board, we would all have to decide whether or not we want to, for example, hire an employee and discuss amongst ourselves what that would mean and whether or not we want to take on that responsibility.
I think that would be much better outlined at the beginning than, but in any case, so as you can see, there is some questions and trepidations about giving such broad powers to a regional committee. And I still have to represent my city. And I'm really hesitant about others representing my city and their views, but love to see this go back to my, for our study session.
Let me just clarify one thing. Just to be clear, when the city selection committee makes those regional appointments, those individuals are representing their cities. They're not representing the cities association. Like a cities association.
No,
They're representing the cities, yes. So I am the cities association rep to MTC.
But also you see that this position is not taking any votes from all of us to go and vote.
And I personally have not voted on, I've abstained from votes when I don't know what all of the cities are, what their positions are. So that's my own practice.
Yeah, I appreciate that from you, because the other members that has been appointed has gone and voted the way that they want to.
And I think that's something that we should be working on with the selection committee, is creating some kind of guidelines on, how to vote, how to represent Santa Clara County. But that is a selection committee issue. It's not the cities association per
But
se.
we could end up with cities association that has 8 members, as you said, but all 14, 15 member cities have to be part of the selection committee. So that means 7 cities wouldn't be on the board. So the selection committee appointment doesn't really represent the board. So it is very separate.
It is, yes. And I think that's the challenge of not having all 15 members on the cities association. So for reference, San Mateo County CAG, I forget what it's cities, I forget what the acronym is, but they are a JPA and they have the same powers. They have their selection committee there. They've been operating for many years that way. So we have a model that we can follow. And so I don't know if I haven't heard that it's been such an issue in San Mateo County.
No, matter of fact, they're happy they moved. Remember, they're happy they moved to the JPA because initially, I think they were operating solely as a selections committee. And then they moved to a broader entity, and they like the fact that being a JPA allows them to do other things apart from just the selections committee.
And they had the planning collaborative first. Because they have the ability to have the RENA numbers come in as a county, and then the cities get together and divvy up the numbers. So, which we've tried here, and it didn't quite work. We tried a couple of times to do that, didn't work out. But so I guess we're just trying to point out the benefits of being an association with all 15 members and a JPA that has the protection and the liability protection. So I think if I could, I think city manager's on the line, so I'll take him first since he's been waiting, and then we'll go to you, Javed.
Let's see, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is Ed Shikata, Palo Alto City Manager. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I did want to, first off, thank the representatives of the board that have visited with the City Managers Association again twice. I'm the current chair of that association. So first off, don't want to suggest that we either took a vote or even tried to gauge consensus among the city managers in either of the meetings that we had with your board representatives. That said, I think it's fair to say that the necessity of a JPA is not a settled issue, at least among many of the cities and the managers in reflecting on what they would expect to be the positions. And in fact, speaking for Palo Alto specifically, and with my city attorney, our city attorney, that we have not reached the conclusion that a JPA is a preferable structure. I would note that in our discussion with your representatives, a range of issues that were discussed, some of which were accepted and some of which were not in the draft agreement. And as such, again, there are a variety of unresolved issues, again, depending on where each city might stand on a variety of topics. I would note the use interchangeably of the term employee and independent contractor, I think is somewhat problematic because that can be confusing because they're not the same and don't have the same level of supervision and expectations of independence that would exist in either case. And then finally, I did want to point out one potential process problem. If some cities go forward with approving the proposed agreement on consent or as stands, and other cities come back with recommended changes to the agreement, unless those changes are effectively going to be not accepted, there is the potential that that first round of cities that approved the current draft would have to go back and reapprove it if there are changes that are made. So that concludes my comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions if helpful. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
What other, if not a JPA, what are other forms of an organization that we should be exploring? I think that's we haven't been able to come up with others.
Well, I think the issue is, are there other ways of avoiding liability? And quite frankly, not hiring employees would be one of the key, I'll say, things not to do as an unincorporated association. So again, that occurred years ago and all the cities worked through that issue. But again, being very clear that an unincorporated association would not hire employees would be one way of avoiding the potential liability without becoming a JPA. Another is really in terms of initiatives and the checks and balances that are built into how initiatives are taken on. In our comments, one point of reference is the Silicon Valley Regional Interoperability Authority. That is a JPA. This is the radio system JPA that has a working committee that is comprised of staff from the member agencies that are used to vet issues prior to bringing a recommendation for board approval. So those are a couple of specific ways that the issues of liability and risk can be managed with an unincorporated association.
So when you say not hiring employees, do you mean employees or including independent like basically staff? Are you saying
Right, I'd
specifically
say
employees or not hiring any staff at all?
not hiring employees. Now, a consultant who is an independent contractor by definition and let Jenny speak to this, but certainly state law and expectations of control over the work as well as the activities of the individuals. With a consultant or independent contractor, there is an assumption of a greater level of independence and as such would be contractually limited in terms of both duties, roles, and expectation obligations to that both individual or corporation, as the case may be.
Thank you, Ed. Jenny, can you talk to two things based on Ed's comments? One is, would you have any concerns if we were to take out the language out of the draft JPA that says we have the ability to hire employees? And then his second point about this other unincorporated entity and a possible working committee, how that compares with a JPA in better protecting us as it relates to liability.
Well, okay, so let me take the second one first, because I just happen to be general counsel for SVRA. So the SVRA, it's not a legal issue, but a contextual issue is all about radio interoperability. And they have a working committee that is very specialized in that knowledge. That isn't to say that this group couldn't have a working committee. I think that's more of a policy perspective and maybe to address Mr. Shikata's concern that I do recall you raising in the city manager's meeting, and it's also addressed in the city manager questions, is that's more about a control or a gate for policy initiatives. It's not so much a legal issue. It's probably more of a political and policy issue. I thought, and I may have misspoke, I thought it said that that this board could hire employees. What it says is that this board can hire staff. And we may want to take a look at that because staff sounds like employee. So I think I should take another look at that particular section. There's also a specific provision in here that Tina reminded me of that says that this agency shall not contract with nor become a member of CalPERS. There's a very specific thing. And I know that my co-general counsel, Andrew Shen, and I have been looking at the independent contractor employee issue vis-a-vis this organization to make sure that we don't run afoul of that. But I think we should look at the staff language. That sounds like.
I might make one more comment, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just to follow on the SVRA or the working committee model, and as it happens, I'm on the working committee, so no unfamiliarity on either part. The working committee is also responsible for review of the annual budget prior to it going to the board for approval, as well as the agreement itself for SVRA provides a requirement that proposed budgets be sent to the member agencies prior to being considered by the board.
And through the president, if I may. So Ed, just to clarify another point, you're saying, at least as to your position, current position, there may be still some uneasiness. Because I know at the city managers meeting, there were other city managers who didn't share this uneasiness about moving towards a JPA. And so I'm curious, what concerns you about the Cities Association becoming a JPA based on the JPA agreement that we have before us? What is your concern about us becoming a JPA versus this other unincorporated entity that I think you're saying may be better?
Well, here I'll be careful to not speak for my city council either, since we haven't had that conversation. But I would note that I'd say we've talked about a few of them, and the clarification on employees versus independent contractors. Appreciate Jenny agreeing to take another look at that. Another would be the undertaking significant programs and how that is structured. Appreciate that the dollar threshold was lowered based on feedback from city managers. At the same time, we did have some discussion of how an initiative can appear to be low cost or no cost at the outset. And it's only after you get into it that you learn that it may be much more involved. And so with that context, again, if there is a JPA, personally, I would suggest that a working committee is a good way to vet that somewhat before the board actually takes action. So again, the incorporation of a working committee in order to address that. Then finally, I do think a couple of things. One, other would be clarifying the due structure up front to provide that clarity for agencies in making the decision to join. I know that topic was raised. Then finally might be clarification related to the role of the executive committee versus the board as a whole and how that decision-making flow occurs.
I thought we had discussed the working committee being executive?
So,
Because we do have a city manager's representative in the executive. They're not a voting member, but we do have a city manager from the president's city as part of the executive board.
and does the executive committee meet in a public meeting?
Yes. Our meetings are public.
So instead of calling it a working group, you're calling it the executive committee.
Essentially, the executive committee plays that role of a working group from what it sounds like.
And what we have done in this draft JPA is clarify the limited role of the executive committee, where the big votes actually come back to the board to make. And Ed, and then I saw that Jani was taking notes. I think everything you've raised can be addressed. And we can still pursue. There was nothing that you raised, and I'm looking at Jani, maybe I'm wrong. But I didn't hear anything that we couldn't address or figure out how to work with and still move forward with a JPA.
I do want to make another point. In most of the JPAs that I've worked on, they're very narrowly focused on a topic. You know, SVRIA is about radio interoperability. We have the San Francisco Creek JPA about the creeks and managing floods and sea level rise and so forth. Silicon Valley, clean energy. This is very broad. This one here for cities associations is very broad. And I think that is one of my concerns. And I you know, that's not something that we can get around, but I think limiting what the powers are and who can vote for what. I mean, I think limitation is what we're going to have to look at. But again, it's going to have to go back to my council.
And you know, we've all read the draft. I think we attempted to do that, Lydia, to limit our role or scope. We can't purchase. We took a lot out of what the JPA could do as an entity. And I want to quickly go back to the timeline concern that Ed made, which is a valid concern. In the event that at our October meeting, as a board, we want to have further discussion. And so we wouldn't be able to adopt in November, which is the ideal timeline. I think our position is that's what we have to do. We will, if it comes October that we realize there's no way we can adopt it in November because our members need more time, then we'll just have to extend the timeline. Ideally, not for the reasons we stated earlier. But I do want everybody to have a comfort level that we do want to hear from your council members. If they have questions, if majority or more of your councils want to see changes, knowing that your city managers have looked at it, your city attorneys have looked at it, and to the extent we could, incorporated their comments and edits. If there's more time needed, that's what we will do. We won't rush it for November. We'll go into January.
And we can call a special meeting.
And we can call,
you know,
right.
Yeah, we can work around that. We just don't want to frankly have to start over again. But the hope is that at least you'll have had the conversation with your council, so your colleagues will be familiar with it, even if the vote happens next year.
Again, Ned Thomas.
I'm sorry, can I?
Sorry, my goodness.
Yeah, this is really a great discussion. I mean, trying to read that draft, honestly, it's not an easy matter. But thank you for all the hard work you guys have done to put it together. And it's been a lot of stuff. I think what might be helpful, a staff report would be helpful. What I would suggest is we take it to our council, but we take it with the staff report that, you know, sets this forward and put in it the proposed billing structure as to how much each city is going to end up paying. And if it's the same as what we're paying under the cities association, then that's what it is. And you know, basically explain why this is. But basically, what my understanding is, we have two choices. Either you stay as cities association and have that liability exposure, or you become a JPA, and then each city doesn't have the liability exposure. And last time the liability issue came up, I think the insurance attorney basically scared everybody else that each one of you cities is going to be liable, which I think was wrong, but they scared all the cities saying that you're going to be personally individually liable. With the JPA, we're not going to be able to do that. So if what you're gaining is no liability on an individual city level and enough insurance coverage on the association level, then that would be a plus. So what I would suggest is if you guys can do a staff report, which is then what we present to our city councils, and to the extent we need discussion or have somebody from the executive committee come and explain what's going on, then I think that would be helpful. And then we can move forward with it, and maybe we can, I sent it to my cities. Now we have a new attorney. So, and I don't know how involved our city manager was. It doesn't sound like he was very actively involved with it. But
An artist? No.
yeah, so he needs to be brought on board. So if you can get an executive committee member and maybe we'll have a presentation to the city council, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Again, Ned Thomas, the acting city manager from. So I just wanted to echo some of the comments made by my colleague, Mr. Shikada. I was at the last meeting and there was not consensus among this, unfortunately, not yet consensus among the city managers. And I think he voiced many of the same concerns that we would have. We got particular concern around the role of the executive committee and how much power would be concentrated there, and if they were to make decisions that were not aligned with the board or with the individual cities, how is that handled? I think is an important issue. And then we had other comments. I know that you met, it's not with me, but with my predecessor and also with our city attorney. Similar to Mr. Shikata, I've had several conversations about this with our city attorney, and we're not quite there yet that we would recommend to our mayor that this is ready to go to our council. But I guess one question I might have, I'm sorry, I'm a little new to this, is there an obligation for the members to take this to our councils if we're not quite ready yet?
Well, from the time, so again, the timeline, and we gave the reasons for the timeline. And we talked about legal fees going up every day. But if majority or more board members vote tonight to say they would like us to incorporate these additional edits that we're hearing from Mr. Shikata and our interim Milpitas city manager, we can do that. Jani's taking notes. We can do that, update the draft and get it out to you so that you can bring it to your councils. But if majority or more of the board members actually want us to bring it back before you take it to the councils, then that would obviously be our October meeting. It's up to majority of the board to make that decision, but just from a timeline perspective, I think it's in the best interest of the organization if we incorporate the edits that I think we have all talked about and have you bring a draft back, because your council members may also have additional input that we can address all at the same time. So at least we start engaging with them, because bear in mind, our colleagues on our councils have not seen it yet. And so the vote tonight could simply be take it back to your councils. And you can say they're still in the staff report, we can explain there's still concerns here, but we wanted to make sure we get it in front of the councils for study sessions like Palo Alto, at least they have something to work with. So we don't wait until October or November to have our councils see it the first time. So maybe that could be the vote tonight, depending on where majority of people are. But I think it's important for us to get it to our councils sooner rather than later, so they can actually see this and absorb it like we have for over 3 years.
Just my 2 cents worth. I had not discussed it with any of the council members in my city of Saratoga. 2 years ago, I was the alternate board member for City Association, and I sat in on some of the challenging issue related meetings, as well as some of the regular open sessions. Last year, I was on the board, and this is also, so in a way, you could consider this my 3rd year on the board. Javed was there last year. I still recall, I think we were still meeting, at least I was virtual, perhaps you were also virtual. We had the same conversation 1 year ago. We went through so much detail. I am not saying to anyone that my city is going to support this fully. I'm not saying that is the right answer. But I do feel strongly, oh, and let me just add this year also, I'm on the, what is currently called executive board. Correct me, I am not an attorney here, so I may be mistaken in something. But I do recall the draft actually calling it out exec committee, not exec board.
It changes in the JPA to executive committee to address the concerns about the powers of the executive board.
Exactly. So just to address that question, again, I wanted Jenny to confirm that. That does take away the power. So we have looked at jointly at the current exec board level, which will become exec committee, which means reducing the powers if this draft document were to go ahead. We've considered the comments, again, not 100%, Jenny has talked enough, talked to city managers association, city attorneys association, was talking to Gary Baum before Jenny last year. And I really do feel, having gone through this whole process very closely this year, we need to move it forward. I don't know what the right answer is. Personally, I think of three things. One is, it's time to move it forward. Otherwise, we will be doing the same thing next year. We will be here at exactly September, October timeframe. Believe me, this is my experience. I hate to say this, but that's what will be happening, and it's an election year. Don't forget that. So everybody will be focused on that, and other things will happen. Secondly, the idea that 8 or 10 or 11, I think enough questions have been asked which say, if not all 15 join, then who's going to be making the decisions? Well, the selection committee will have all 15 members, but the board will not have 15 if not all 15 join. Personally, I think strength always lies in numbers. If the whole family stays together, you do better for everybody. And that has been my experience. The two regional groups that I have served on is the Cities Association and the Silicon Valley. I have learned so much, not just what I am doing there. I have learned so much, and I've shared this with you in my city. I take what I learned from each one of you. I don't have a conflict of interest with her or her, because the issues I'm voting on in my council are very different. Serving together, I learned so much from each one of you, what's happening regionally, what I can take back to my city, how to make arguments at times in my city council meeting. The third issue, which is actually the most important, is the liability issue. Having a little bit of understanding that I have gained in the last 2 years for this organization, from what I have understood, the sooner the Cities Association, whatever that answer is, I will not say that because I'm not an attorney, but whatever way we can minimize the liability for each city, I would personally think each city would be in a better state. But ultimately, it's up to each city council members with the wise input, advice from our city managers as well as city attorneys. What is the right thing for each city to do? So my request to all of you, my colleagues, tonight would be, let us hear a list whenever the chair is ready. Let us hear a list from Jenny about the suggested changes. And if at all we can come to a majority vote tonight to take it to our city councils, get that process started, rather than be spinning around right here and next year will be a different subset. I was actually happy to see Javed here today. Not because I have any issues with Brian.
The same person.
Exactly.
The same
Brian was asking the same questions in April, May, whatever of this year in this room. The questions that Javed asked 1 year ago, because last year Javed was on this board, this year Brian is on this board. Just for that reason, I was happy to see Javed here today, and that's why we didn't hear too many questions from him.
Doesn't pass Javid, you have to come back next year. I'm kidding.
I'll stop.
No, so somebody knew.
Thank you for that, Tina. I think that was a great summary. So are we ready to, Danny, do you have a list of the suggested changes that you could go through?
Well, there's really only two. I mean, it's, one of them carries out throughout the agreement, but to make it express that this body can't hire employees, that you can retain it's gonna I'm gonna need to do a little bit of work about how to phrase that, but that and look at Charlie's contract, I'll have to look at that. But to really make it clear, and there's a number of places where I think that we could actually do some wordsmithing to address that. So that it's clear that this body can't hire an employee. The other issue that was raised is whether or not you want the addition of a working committee, or within that one provision about significant
Initiatives.
significant programs, whether there's a process, whether it be a working committee or whether it be some other process to propose to provide to address that concern, that it will go to the city managers association for input. Is just something off the top of my head. What if you want something to do, it says if the board desires to create a significant program or activity which will utilize significant resources of the agency, meaning the JPA, it shall do so by a vote of the board. And we did reduce that. It used to be $40,000 down to $10,000. So if anything is over $10,000, it has to go to the board. So I don't know if you want me to craft some language so that it will have a clearinghouse that be presented to the city managers for input before being presented to the board, or going to having a working committee, or modifying the executive board so that there's a ex officio member or something. That's the one I'm not clear. I need direction on that one.
So what about the feedback from the city managers? Has that been incorporated in that draft?
No.
Not yet. So when will that happen?
Well, I mean, we did. Meaning feedback in this context. We have presented to the city managers, and as they have both 100% accurately stated, there was no consensus. The last discussion was highlighting the issues and really talking about the process to move the document forward. So what I'm looking for is direction. It's been raised as a concern that this entity would take on new programs, and that there needs to be some mechanism, whether it be a working committee, that's one idea was floated, before this board would decide to take on something new.
And just two things, Jenny, I think we incorporated some of the changes from the city managers. We
Yes.
did. And then two, just to give an example, when we talk about programs or initiatives, it's for example, the roundtable, right? If a program like the roundtable would cost the JPA $10,000 or more, is it annually? Then
yes,
do we want to have a working committee like Ed described that vets it, comes up with how it would work, and then bring a proposal to the board? Because that's not what exists today, and we hear concerns about that because some cities were upset about how the roundtable was formed and the petition claim that resulted from some of the things that happened at the roundtable, and so that was a big concern. So that's one way to address the issue about creating programs or initiatives like the roundtable. Do we want to have a working committee like Ed suggested? And then Johnny, one other thing I think I'm hearing from folks is the role of the executive committee. What powers do we really have?
Well, that has been modified in this agreement so that it is no longer the executive board. It is now an executive committee.
It's very limited, remember.
And that it's the board that makes most of the choices.
We're bringing everything back to you guys.
Yeah, we just recommend,
Choices of what?
we just recommend to the board whatever we recommend. So we don't, the executive committee, call it the committee now, has limited, I don't think it has any power to make decisions on its own. It just recommends things to the board.
The executive
adoption.
committee, subject to the approval by the board of directors, shall exercise all powers and duties of the board related to entering into agreements, but they have to get the authority of the board before they can do that. And the executive committee may have additional powers if they're delegated to it by the board, except for the adoption of the agency's annual budget. So the board has to approve the annual budget. The executive committee cannot do that. And the executive committee shall provide notice to the board before authorizing or conducting any investigations. So they can't do it by themselves. They have to come and tell the board, and there has to be a majority vote of the board before that can take place. So those were specific changes that were made to address concerns that the executive board was doing things without notifying the board.
Yes.
So to piggyback on the roundtable, you mentioned the roundtable, didn't each city have a vote in whether or not to join the roundtable? I mean, wasn't that the process? So yeah, I'm a little vague on this committee and this working committee to decide whether or not you're going to take on a project. I mean, it would go back to the city regardless of whether you have a working committee or not. Is that my correct understanding?
It would come to this board at least.
Okay.
So there's no extra powers in the
Right.
executive committee. And I understand with like SVRIA or SVC, because those are very technical issues, but you know, we're policy. So, and I guess I look at it as like, I very much appreciate city managers, but this is about with, you know, we are council members, so we deal with policy and we make our decisions for our councils. So I don't see why we couldn't do that here. They definitely take input, but, and to be frank, I did not expect to, and we did not ask the City Managers Association to take a vote on this, whether to support it or not, because frankly, I believe this is a decision of our board as council members. With all due respect to the city managers.
They go ahead and do a motion.
Yes.
I'd like to move that this association or the staff report outlining the JPA that it proposes be adopted. With the staff report, the JPA that has been submitted to this association this evening will be modified if council understands the comments from all of us as to what changes we are suggesting. And that will be the JPA that we forward. And that a member of the executive committee or whoever be available to make a presentation to the city councils to explain to them what's going on. And one of the changes that we propose is that there'll be a working committee for any project that's over $10,000. That'll review it before it goes to the board. That's it. Okay.
It's not,
No, there is no working committee.
Okay.
no, the city managers had mentioned.
So there'll be a working committee that will review any project that's over 10,000. That's one of the suggestions that
Who would
I think was made.
Right.
Who would you put on the working?
Yes.
Well, could be the executive committee or whoever else wants to work on that. The executive committee could be the working committee.
So can I read back the motion? Because there's a lot.
I love when clerks do.
The motion is to forward a staff report proposing the GPA that was discussed tonight, which will be modified as per tonight's comments.
Yes.
And then, do you want me to add the process stuff?
And then those comments would be to relook at it in terms of eliminating the ability of the JPA to hire employees and make those changes. And if would you like a strikeout in a regular version or just call it out in description in the staff report?
Whatever is easier for you.
I think a strikeout would be better so that the city managers and attorneys sees that.
And the only challenge is we've made some minor modifications since last year. So they'll see that it's a strikeout from the October 21st version. It'll be a strikeout from October 21st version.
2020?
2023, August 21st version is the last, okay. And then
Went to the CNs.
the working committee, who would be on the working committee?
Executive committee.
And can I just, it's not necessarily a legal issue, but I feel If the concern is that the executive committee has too much power, making the executive committee the working committee might be counterproductive.
I'm open to suggestions on that.
Would people be comfortable if the executive committee appoints to the working committee? Or do you want the board?
So who is on the executive
Working committee.
Who is on the executive committee?
So myself, Lisa, Larry Klein, Tina Walia, and Hung Wei.
But these are positions like president, vice president.
And it'll change next year. It's a president, first, second VP, secretary, treasurer, and then at large, right?
Let the board appoint the work committee then.
Yeah.
And that's, and the board could also decide whether or not a working committee is necessary, right?
I mean, the board.
Yeah,
can
the
just
board
decide.
should just say, for this one, we don't need a working committee, let's just vote to do it.
Right, that's fine.
But this already says if you want to do an activity or a program over 10,000, the board has to vote on it.
Right,
So
well,
why
Mr.
do we need a
Shikata,
working?
I agree.
And Ed brought it up that he thought a working committee would be a good idea. So we can vote on it and we can decide we don't need it.
But that's better to put in bylaws or something than in the JPA.
I agree with that. So
Let's get a consensus on that. So do you want it in the bylaws or do you want it in the JPA?
Yeah, bylaws or leave it out and they can bring it up when they discuss the Palo Alto. I mean, we're gonna get tons of feedback that comes from each, so that can come up again.
But our bylaws more easily change than the ZBA as things change over time.
Yeah.
It's just need to be nimble.
Yeah.
We want it to be nimble, but we also want all of us to agree on something. So I'm just trying to see, if you put it in the JPA saying the board can appoint a working committee if it deems it's necessary. Just leave it at that.
And Javed, I know you're an attorney too, like the bylaws will not supersede the JPA, right?
No,
So,
correct.
so
But you can easily put that exact sentence in the JPA. If the
Yeah.
board deems it's necessary, you can appoint a working committee.
there's a motion.
Okay, and I didn't hear any other changes. I heard a concern that the powers were too broad, but I didn't hear any other things other than addressing the employee and then the working committee.
Can I bring up one thing? Javed's motion said over 10,000. The way it reads in here, it's 10,000 plus the CPI increase. So does your 10,000 include the CPI increase? So it's consistent with what?
Yes, it
No,
does.
I'm serious because you're changing.
we should
what's-
get it right.
We should get it right.
Whatever the limit was.
Yes, and then.
I'm just looking for clarification because I thought the last thing Javed said, which Jenny repeated, is if the board deems it necessary, it can appoint a working committee and had taken out that 10,000.
No,
No,
the 10,000
It's
is
still
still
tied
there.
with
Over
the,
10,000.
never mind.
Plus CPI.
Member or Director Mohan?
Hi, I wanted to follow up on the motion that was made, and I had some process questions. You're talking about taking the staff report, the JPA agreement as it stands today. The motion is to take that forward to our council and then make the changes that were suggested today. Is that right? Is that going to be incorporated in the JPA agreement, or is that a separate thing that we will discuss later with the city council? And so my real question was, are all the loose ends going to be tied up in the document that is submitted to council, or will it be more than a one-part process?
So we will incorporate all of the changes we discussed this evening into the document that we will then forward to all of you with the staff report.
And then we'll create more loose ends.
Yeah.
A lot more.
Better come back. Or at least we know whether you want to do it or not.
We need to protect our city sooner rather than later. We need to, we're not protected right now.
Can I read back the motion?
Yeah, please.
Sorry. Forward a staff report proposing the JPA be modified as per tonight's comments, and those comments are eliminating the ability to hire employees and establish a working committee to be appointed by the board if the board deems it necessary
for projects/programs over $10,000
Plus CPI.
plus CPI. Yeah, I forgot something.
And then the recommendation with the exec committee member be available to present to each council.
Right.
Oh,
An executive committee member will be available to present. We need one of you guys to explain it again to us.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Can I just clarify that Chappie Jones, who's not technically a member of the executive board, could be one of those individuals?
and we're
He's
calling.
one of the signatures?
No, he may be one of the individuals who goes to the cities to answer questions.
So it'll be either a member of the executive committee or a representative appointed by.
Because he's former.
Director Lahi, I'm gonna
And
put
we were
executive
thinking
board
maybe
because
dividing
that's what
cities
we're
if there's a
calling it now.
conflict on meeting nights,
So
who can help
JPA, it will
us.
change into the executive committee.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
So I have a question. So if I vote for this doesn't mean that I am conferring that I want a JP.
Exactly.
No.
It just means you're gonna move it to the council.
Yeah.
Oh, one other thing on that thing, what will go with that is also the proposed billing structure as to how much each city is gonna have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
But can we
That was what I
clarify,
said.
Yes, I'll
billing?
accept the friendly or whatever
Thank you.
adjective amendment it was.
I just want to make sure we're able to provide the information that they're asking for with regards to the
Time.
billing. So
That's very short.
what do you understand by that, Shali, when they ask for the fee information?
What I think it means is that you want a formula for how we calculate the membership dues going forward.
Or a due structure. I don't
Or
know
due
that
structure.
necessarily has to be a formula. A
And
due
it could be what you've been using so far, because I read somewhere it's not gonna change, so if that's what you're proposing to use, you can just give us the last one.
So I have a hypothetical question. So let's say we form a JPA and, the fees start going really high and we're saying, oh, I don't want to be part of this JPA no more. Are we bound that we have to stay in the JPA?
And Director Watanabe?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Chair. I know I've been quiet. I'm tired. It's going on 1 o'clock in the morning for me here. But I just wanted you to know that I had reached out to our city staff once I received the packet from Shali, and our staff had got back to me, basically, funnily enough, with the same 3 issues that have been discussed this evening. So that's why I really didn't weigh in on anything, because our city manager and staff had the same concerns, or just comments about, the employee language and the executive committee, and actually said there was a comment that said it looked like they forgot to add the second vice president to the highlighted language to make the 5 officers. So I don't know if anybody's taking some notes and wants to look into that. And then the other thing, the other third item was just regarding the being supportive of the amount of $10,000. But then I was glad to hear tonight just that I guess maybe the city manager said that there would be a study session that our city council will be having a study session, which I think is really important and for everybody to understand. And I hope that all of our cities, if possible, will be able to have study sessions and to be able to understand this and make these decisions and take a good solid vote on this, because so much work has been put into it over the last several years, and it would be good to get it finalized and again so that we can move forward. So, but thank you to everybody for all the work that you've put into this. Thank you.
You should vote before she falls asleep.
Yeah, so we're gonna call for the question before you.
Thank you.
The motion was made by Director Elahi and seconded by Director Meadows. I will call out your cities for the vote. Campbell? Aye. Cupertino?
Aye, yes.
Okay. Los Altos?
Aye.
Los Gatos?
Aye.
Milpitas?
Aye.
Montessorino?
Aye.
Mountain View?
Aye.
Palo Alto?
Yes.
Okay. Santa Clara?
Yes.
Saratoga,
Aye.
Sunnyvale.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Hills. The Hills.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Ms. Swan. Los Altos Hills. Aye.
The mayor came specially. for
Thank
you.
you.
I know, I appreciate you coming. Thank you so much.
You guys do a lot of work.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
all for this.
We're adjourning.
Fewer items, city manager, update, we have no update, and oh my gosh, I just wanted to very briefly thank those of you who received their membership dues for the fiscal year. There's 5 of you left, and I will be reaching out to you personally. Your city managers.
After we do that.
Yeah, that.
Thank you, that's it for me. Any announcements from anyone? Not, we stand adjourned at 9:47. Thank you so much for staying late and.
Thank you, guys.
Great conversation.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Good night, Kathy.
Take care.
1 o'clock here, which was 4.
Oh my God.
Let's just say I lost my filters towards the end of the meeting.
So you made it through.
I'll work on this.
I had it, I did the.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good night. Thank you very much. Yes, very
I guess I do like it.
It's a great color.
It's great. Thank you so much.
Bye, you can see you. You're in there.
Thank you.
Good, because you care, so, yes, yes, no, I told myself that. I know, but.
Just send it to the city manager and I'll remind them.
Take care.
I mean, that's. It's kind of soft and.
Thank you, Margaret. You guys have done so much
That was a
work
great
on this.
motion.
Great motion. I gotta get. Get it out. Enough is enough.
And the way it is, we could come back with more.
Yeah, it will, but at least it's move forward.
Maybe Curry's favor.
I found so, wasn't.
All right, so what's our timetable to get this out?
But because I'm the mayor, I wanted to, yeah, because that was a while ago.
Do you think they need to see the staff report?
So it was still pretty early, it was still early registration rate. Like the hotels were.
Yeah, we started a staff
But
report.
I just got on,
To decide, like, we have a staff report that says. Kind of.
I don't know whether
both, but I think.
I mean, it sounded like it's good, though, it sounded a little bit, so I don't know.
And then.
Yeah, well, I wanted to, as a mayor.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. I wanted to. So we'll do that.
What if that is the thing, though, what if 3 cities adopted and the other ones don't?
Well, I'm thinking maybe
Canberra
we
doesn't,
should
Canberra doesn't put it on until after next one will be the last week.
So after.
I think
Milton.
Okay, all right, well, I'm sure we'll be
And then,
feeling.
like at the end of that week, we even, so maybe.
They didn't.
Yeah, okay.
I mean,
They don't even remember they were here a year ago.
And the city managers were.
Yeah, oh, yeah, we
So,
also, yeah, we can, or we can meet in the.
And we're.
Either way.
Do we want to change
When do I
it?
see you next?
Andrew, look at that one, but I'll do the rest.
Finance.
Work on the staff report and
I
then.
think that's October
The staff
or
report.
something, that's
Queen.
Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
Because I know I had to move something.
Okay.
You and Lisa.
I know that's Tuesday.
All right, so remember that, we'll touch base for late September then.
It's not
Okay, sounds good. Yes, all right.
Thank
Oh,
you.
well, thank you, good to meet
voice
you
the
in
reason.
person.
I was just gonna call.
Well, it
it
was obvious an hour ago that we just need to send it to the council.
And you just have to think it through when you take it to your council relative to the ones that are not, so.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I think we should take it anyway, because in this whole big, I called it a hairball. We're gonna get so many loose ends. It's gonna be this hairball of stuff that comes back.
Yeah.
And so I think, our council has to have it. But I mean, there's gonna be, we're gonna hear some of that
Yes.
from at least one. So you just gotta get it there and, so.
I want to get to the next step, you know?
Yeah, 'cause
otherwise
I do too. I do too. I like moving on to new things. So, okay. I think let's.
All right, then, oh, wait,
This
is
the
April
meeting
meeting,
and then, yes,
where
is
the?
Oh, and this is the applications.
Right,
Okay.
yes. And I have to sometimes do agenda.
Okay.
Application.
Okay.
And
Got it.
honestly,
Then we
I
got
don't
this.
know.
Oh, yeah, keep them in there. All right.
Good.
No.
Have a good evening.
Sounds
Get off my back, I'm gone next
Yeah.
year, so,
No,
you
yeah.
know.
Seriously, I'm actually feeling nervous that if we don't do this JP, I genuinely might quit because I feel like
I think-
liability's gonna come down
Well,
on me.
because there is
Oh,
the
look at
revenue,
Susan.
there is the open. Is that still on?
No. Is it? Uh-oh. I
Yeah,
didn't-
it is live.
I just closed my,
It's live.
yeah, I closed it, so it should have,
We had the closed session. We were in a closed session one time. Oh, yeah, terrifying. It was like, yeah, like years ago, like 15 years ago. In a closed session, it was recording. Oh, yeah, it was. Is that on?
That's good.
I'm still live? I thought I exited out.
You're running it, so.
Show.
I did.
Thanks, Sophie.